Good morning, students. This is Miss Cat, and this is your lesson for Monday, December 14th. Today, we are going to finish reading the short story, The Lottery, and we are going to review some key terms that are really important for understanding the meaning of this story. So, firstly, the story is called The Lottery, and a lottery is a system of deciding who will get something by choosing people's names by chance, by choosing people's names randomly. Sometimes in a lottery, people choose a number, and then a number is chosen randomly, and the person with that number is the winner. Usually, a person that wins the lottery gets something good, like a prize. The most common lottery in the United States is a lottery run by each state where you can win money through buying lottery tickets. So you buy a little ticket with some numbers, and then each state draws some numbers randomly. And if your ticket has the right numbers, you win some money. So that's one form of lottery. But a lottery in general is just a system of deciding who will get something by choosing a person's name by chance. Another keyword important to understanding the lottery is to understand what the word generation means. A generation are all of the people that are about the same age. So young people and teenagers, that is one generation. Older people like your parents and myself, okay, that is a different generation from you. Okay, they are older than you. And people that are even older, like your grandparents, your parents' parents, they are a different generation than you and a different generation than your parents. Okay. And lastly, a ritual. A ritual is a ceremony that's always performed the same way every time. And this ceremony marks an important religious or social occasion. In this case, the lottery, okay, this lottery that the town has every year is a ritual. They have the lottery exactly the same day at exactly the same time, and they go through the lottery step by step exactly the same way every year. It is their ritual. They have never changed it. And understanding that this lottery is a ritual is really important to understanding the story because people like you and me have rituals as well. Societies, countries, cultures all around the world have rituals. So this story might be trying to tell us something about rituals. In the story, we are going to be analyzing a few things. The first is symbolism. A symbol is an object in a story that represents an idea or quality. For example, a gun represents violence and a rose represents romance and love. We are going to be looking for objects as well as colors that are symbolic in the story, The Lottery. We are also going to be looking for some foreshadowing. Foreshadowing are clues early in a story, the first page of the story, maybe even the first paragraph. Clues in a story that give us a hint toward how the story will end. Usually, it is impossible to know what is foreshadowing in a story until you actually know how the story ends. So, we are going to wait until we're done with the story and figure out how it ends. And then we're going to go back and look at the beginning of the story. And we're going to see if there were any clues that the author planted to hint at how the story would end. The last thing we're going to analyze about this story is theme. The theme of any story is the message for readers. It's the idea that we can learn from the story and apply to life outside the story, that we can apply to ourselves and our own lives and the people that we know. outside of the story. So, we've already talked a little bit about how the idea of ritual is really important to this story. Okay, I'm going to give you kind of a clue right now to let you know that one theme, and I say that specifically one theme because sometimes stories have more than one theme. In this story, one theme is going to be about rituals and what kind of role rituals should have in a just or good society. Okay? Notice how this is an idea that can apply to the story because the story has a ritual. Their ritual is the lottery. And we're going to see this ritual. We're going to watch how it happens and how it ends. But you can take this idea about a ritual and how a good society should have rituals. You can take that idea out of the story and apply it to life in general. So, how should our society have rituals? How should people participate in rituals? Not just in the story, but in our lives. Okay? And that's really important with this idea of theme. A theme is not a statement about the story itself. A theme is a statement that you can take from the story, something the story teaches you, and apply it to real life and real people outside the story. Okay? All right, now that we have reviewed those key terms, let's continue reading in the lottery. So far, we know that it is an early summer day on June 27th, very beautiful day. There is a small village of about 300 people, and all of the people in the village gathered together in the middle of the village for the lottery. So, first the children came, and the boys picked up and made a big pile of stones in one corner of the square. So the square is the place in the middle where all of the people are gathering. And in one corner of the square, there's a big, huge pile of stones that all the little boys have piled up. And then the men, their fathers, come and talk with each other. And then the women come, and the women stand by their husbands and call their children so that each family is standing together with a man and his wife and their children. And then Mr. Summers and Mr. Graves come. Mr. Summers is carrying a black wooden box, and Mr. Graves comes with a stool, and Mr. Summers puts the black box down on the stool. And in this paragraph right here, we get the curious impression that all of the people that live in the village, we call them villagers, all those people are kind of scared of this box because they leave a big space in between themselves and the stool where the box is. So, like, they don't even want to get close to it. And when Mr. Summers asks for help, there's a hesitation before some people help him. Nobody wants to get close enough to the box, even to help Mr. Summers. Okay, so then the story gets into talking about the lottery and how very, 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 very old this ritual of the lottery is. So old that the box, the black box, is all crumbling and falling apart. But nobody wants to get a new box because they don't want to upset their tradition. Okay, a little bit of talk about how they use pieces of paper now instead of chips of wood because they have more people in their town and the chips of wood would not fit anymore. So they use small pieces of paper. Okay, so as we're starting the lottery, Mr. Summers is making up lists of the families and the heads of the household of each family. In this case, the head of the household is considered the man of the family. Okay. So, more talk about the tradition of the lottery. And then, right as we're about to start, this lady named Mrs. Hutchinson comes late and she says she forgot that it was lottery day. And she goes up to her husband, and everyone kind of laughs at her because she's late. And everybody's real cheerful, including herself. Okay, and Mr. Summers says, haha, thought we were going to have to go on without you, Tessie. And Miss Hutchinson smiles back at him. So everybody seems to be in a good mood here. And then they proceed with the lottery. So Clyde Dunbar has broken his leg and he can't come, so his wife is going to draw for him. Okay, then there's this kind of curious conversation where Mr. Summers asks if the Watson boy is drawing this year. And the Watson boy seems to be, well, rather young because they call him a boy. They don't call him a man. So he must be kind of young. But he is the oldest man in his household. And so he is drawing for himself and his mother, even though he's just a young boy, maybe 16 or 17, something like that. And we don't know why. We don't know where his father is. But he seems really nervous and kind of unhappy. And people encourage him by saying, like, good job and glad to see your mom's got a man. Okay. So he seems kind of nervous. We don't know why his dad's here. Okay. Why his dad's not here. Excuse me. Okay. And then they get started. So apparently, what this lottery is that every man in a family has to come up and take a piece of paper from the box. And so Mr. Summers calls out the name of each family. And the man of the family comes and he takes out a piece of paper and he's not allowed to look at it. Each man has to simply hold the paper until everyone has one. So Mr. Summers calls all the names: Adams, Allen, Anderson, Bentham. And we kind of noticed as we read this that people seem nervous. They are quiet. They are licking their lips. They are not looking around. So maybe they are just like looking at the ground, but they're not looking around at each other. And they do not look at their papers either. They don't look at their papers. And while the lottery is going on, so like Mr. Summers is calling names, Clark, Delacroix, okay, he calls all the names. While this is happening, there are some conversations going on. And Mrs. Delacroix says, oh gosh, it seems like there's no time at all between lotteries. Seems like we just got through with the last one last week. Okay, so she seems to be complaining a little bit. Okay. Okay, we see the word nervously. Okay, turning the papers over and over nervously. Okay, this is a strange sort of lottery. Okay, calling more names. Okay, Hutchinson, that's the lady that was late, and she's laughing. She says, go get up there, Bill. She's laughing as her husband goes up to get the paper. Okay, everybody else seems nervous though. So there's a conversation here between the Adams family, Mr. and Mrs. Adams, and Old Man Warner. Old Man Warner is the oldest man in town. He has gone through 77 lotteries. He's very, very, very old. And Mr. Adams says to the old man, he says, you know, in some of those other villages, they're talking of not doing the lottery anymore. And old man Warner said he gets kind of angry. He's like, oh, they're so crazy and they're just like stupid young people. You know, they want to get rid of old things, old traditions like the lottery. Um, and I don't know. Old man Warner seems to think that if they stop doing the lottery, they're going to become uncivilized. Like they're going to go back to living in caves and eating like wild plants. Like somehow this lottery keeps them civilized, it keeps them living properly. And if they don't have the lottery, then they can't be proper civilized people. And he says things like, there's always been a lottery. And it would only be trouble to not do the lottery. Okay, so more names: Martin Overdike Percy. Everybody seems really nervous. Okay, that poor Watson boy comes and draws his slip. Okay, and then the last name, Zanini. So then everybody opens their papers, and it turns out that Bill Hutchinson has got it. Whatever it is, Bill Hutchinson has got it. Okay, so we're going to finish the story now. Go tell your father, Mrs. Dunbar said to her older son. People began to look around and see the Hutchinsons. Bill Hutchinson was standing, quiet, staring down at the paper in his hand. Suddenly, Tessie Hutchinson shouted to Mr. Summers, "You didn't give him enough time to take any paper he wanted. I saw you. It wasn't fair." Okay, well, this is really interesting because Tessie Hutchinson has been in a really good mood for the whole story. Like, remember when her husband went up to get the paper and she said, "Get up there, Bill." Ha ha ha. And everybody was laughing. And you remember when Mrs. Hutchinson came late? Um, she was the one that came late, right? And she was making jokes. She was smiling. She was grinning. Mrs. Hutchinson said grinning, and she was making jokes like, "You wouldn't have me leave my dishes in the sink now, would ya? Ha 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 ha." And she made everybody laugh. Like, she was really happy before, like having a lot of fun. And then her husband got the paper, and now she's really upset. She's shouting, she's yelling, she's saying it wasn't fair. Okay, weird. Let's keep reading. "Be a good sport, Tessie," Mrs. Delacroix called, and Mrs. Graves said, "All of us took the same chance." "Shut up, Tessie," Bill Hutchinson said. Wow, her own husband told her to shut up. "Well, everyone," Mr. Summers said, "that was done pretty fast, and now we've got to be hurrying a little more to get done in time." He consulted his next list. "Bill," he said, "you draw for the Hutchinson family. You got any other households in the Hutchinsons?" "There's Don and Eva," Mrs. Hutchinson yelled. "Make them take their chance." "Daughters draw with their husbands' families, Tessie," Mr. Summers said gently. "You know that as well as anyone else." "It wasn't fair," Tessie said. This is the second time she said that, right? It wasn't fair. She said that before, right? It wasn't fair. Do you remember repetition? Repetition is repeating the same words over and over again. Okay? So, like, just in the space of a couple paragraphs, I've already seen Tessie Hutchinson repeat, "It wasn't fair." I think that might be important. Now, Mr. Summers asked Bill Hutchinson, "Do you have any other households in your family?" And Mrs. Hutchinson says, "Don and Eva." But Summers says daughters draw with their husbands' families. So Eva must be Mrs. Hutchinson's daughter, and she must be married to a man named Don. So Mrs. Hutchinson says she wants her daughter and her daughter's husband to draw with them. But Mr. Summers says, "No, your daughter draws with her husband's family." So Eva, her daughter, draws with Don's family. But Mrs. Hutchinson wants to make them draw with their family. That's kind of interesting. "It wasn't fair," Tessie said. "I guess not, Joe," Bill Hutchinson said regretfully. "My daughter draws with her husband's family, that's only fair, and I've got no other family except the kids." "Then, as far as drawing for families is concerned, it's you," Mr. Summers said in explanation, "and as far as drawing for households is concerned, that's you too, right?" "Right," Bill Hutchinson said. "How many kids, Bill?" Mr. Summers said formally. "Three," Bill Hutchinson said. "There's Bill Jr. and Nancy and little Dave, and Tessie and me." "All right then," Mr. Summers said. "Harry, you got their tickets back?" Mr. Graves nodded and held up the slips of paper. "Put them in the box then," Mr. Summers directed. "Take Bill's and put it in." "I think we ought to start over," Mrs. Hutchinson said, as quietly as she could. "I tell you, it wasn't fair. You didn't give him time enough to choose. Everybody saw that." For the third time now, Mrs. Hutchinson said it's not fair. Mr. Graves had selected the 5 slips and put them in the box, and he dropped all the papers but those onto the ground, where the breeze caught them and lifted them off. "Listen, everybody," Mrs. Hutchinson was saying to the people around her. "Ready, Bill?" Mr. Summers said, and Bill Hutchinson, with one quick glance around at his wife and children, nodded. "Remember," Mr. Summers said, "take the slips and keep them folded until each person has taken one. Harry, you help little Dave." Mr. Graves took the hand of the little boy, who came willingly with him up to the box. "Take a paper out of the box, Davy," Mr. Summer said. Davy put his hand into the box and laughed. "Take just one paper," Mr. Summer said. "Harry, you hold it for him." Mr. Graves took the child's hand and removed the folded paper from the tight fist, and held it, while little Dave stood next to him and looked up at him wonderingly. It doesn't say how old little Dave is, but I get the impression he must be very small. Okay, he's just a child. He holds things in his tight little fists like a little child does. And he doesn't say anything. He only laughs and looks. So I would assume that little Davy can't be more than maybe 2 or 3 years old. Very, very small child. But he has to draw in this lottery too. "Nancy next," Mr. Summers said. Nancy was 12, and her school friends breathed heavily as she went forward, switching her skirt, and took a slip daintily from the box. "Bill Jr.," Mr. Summers said, and Billy, his face red and his feet overlarge, nearly knocked the box over as he got his paper out. "Tessie," Mr. Summers said. She hesitated for a minute, looking around defiantly, and then set her lips and went up to the box. She snatched a paper out and held it behind her. "Bill," Mr. Summers said, and Bill Hutchinson reached into the box and felt around, bringing his hand out at last with the slip of paper in it. The crowd was quiet. A girl whispered, "I hope it's not Nancy," and the sound of the whisper reached the edges of the crowd. "It's not the way it used to be," Old Man Warner said clearly. "People ain't the way they used to be." I wonder what he means by that. So a little girl says, "I hope it's not Nancy. She must be Nancy's friend. She's scared that Nancy is going to win this lottery." It should be pretty obvious by this point that whoever wins the lottery does not get something good, because nobody wants to win it. The little girl says, "I hope it's not Nancy," because she loves Nancy. And Old Man Warner says, "It's not the way it used to be. People ain't the way they used to be." So he's saying people did not used to be like this girl who hoped her friend does not win the lottery. People did not used to care about each other like that. What is he saying here? It's very interesting. "All right," Mr. Summers said. "Open the papers. Harry, you open little Dave's." Mr. Graves opened the slip of paper, and there was a general sigh through the crowd as he held it up, and everyone could see that it was blank, nothing on it. Nancy and Bill Jr. opened theirs at the same time, and both beamed and laughed, turning around to the crowd and holding their slips of paper above their head. So they are very happy that they did not win the lottery. "Tessie," Mr. Summers said. There was a pause, and then Mr. Summers looked at Bill Hutchinson, and Bill unfolded his paper and showed it. It was blank. "It's Tessie," Mr. Summers said, and his voice was hushed. "Show us her paper, Bill." Bill Hutchinson went over to his wife and forced the slip of paper out of her hand. It had a black spot on it. The black spot Mr. Summers had made the night before with a heavy lead pencil in the coal company office. Bill Hutchinson held it up, and there was a stir in the crowd. "All right, folks," Mr. Summers said. "Let's finish quickly." Although the villagers had forgotten the ritual and lost the original black box, they still remembered how to use stones. The pile of stones the boys had made earlier was ready. There were stones on the ground with the blowing scraps of paper that had come out of the box. Mrs. Delacroix selected a stone so large she had to pick it up with both hands. And she turned to Mrs. Dunbar. "Come on," she said. "Hurry up." Mrs. Dunbar had small stones in both hands, and she said, gasping for breath, "I can't run at all. You'll have to go ahead, and I'll catch up with you." The children had stones already, and someone gave little Davy Hutchinson a few pebbles. Tessie Hutchinson was in the center of a cleared space by now, and she held her hands up desperately. as the villagers moved in on her. "It isn't fair," she said. A stone hit her on the side of the head. Old Man Warner was saying, come on, everyone." Steve Adams was in the front of the crowd of villagers with Mrs. Graves beside him. "It isn't fair. It isn't right," Mrs. Hutchinson screamed. And then they were upon her. So what did the people do with the stones? What is this lottery? What happens to the person who wins this lottery? It would appear that the winner of this lottery is killed by stoning. The rest of the people in the village throw stones upon the person until they are dead. And these people do this every year. It is their ritual. Some of them complain a little bit, like Mr. Adams said. Remember, Mr. Adams said, um, they don't do this in these other towns. They're talking of not doing the lottery anymore. Some places don't do lotteries anymore. So there's a little bit of complaining. But for the most part, everybody goes on and does it. Nobody says stop. Nobody says we can't do this. Everyone just participates and hope that they are not the one that wins. They don't seem to like it. Everyone is nervous. Everyone's unhappy. Little girl says, I hope my friend Nancy doesn't die. Okay, nobody seems to like it. And Old Man Warner says, people aren't the way they used to be. He seems to indicate that people must have liked it more in the past. And now they don't like it as much. They're nervous and uncomfortable. And he doesn't like that. He seems to really like this lottery. Remember at the end, Old Man Warner says, come on, everyone. He's like super into it. I think the part of the story that really gets to me is this line right here. The children had stones already, and someone gave little Davy Hutchinson a few pebbles. So even the children participate in this. Even the children throw stones upon the person until they're dead. And even little Davy Hutchinson, this little baby, will throw stones upon his mother and watch her die. This seems absolutely horrible to us, right? I mean, it seems vicious, it seems cruel. But to these people, it's perfectly normal. It's their ritual, it's their way of life. They do it every year. Is there a message in this for us? Is there a meaning? Is there something that we can understand about rituals and about how we should think about rituals and how we should participate in rituals? Interesting questions.